What's up, everyone? James Lynch here doing a quick reaction video to the news that Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal will be having a rematch, but it's going to be in the boxing ring. This is according to Happy Punch. It says Nate Diaz, Masvidal, boxing match confirmed, March in Las Vegas. The UFC has given the green light, sources tell Happy Punch. Of course, Masvidal under UFC contract. So good to see the UFC letting Masvidal get to take this opportunity despite the fact that Masvidal is still under UFC contract. And I know people are going to say Happy Punch, like they're just reporting this, no big deal. Ariel Helwani then went on and reported this as well, saying that Nate Diaz is in fact in the works later this year, sources say. First reported by Happy Punch. I asked Diaz's rep. He said, I can't confirm that. As I said multiple times recently, neither man was slated or in talks for UFC 300. This was always the targeted bout. Good. I have been very vocal about this as well. I did not want to see Nate Diaz or Jorge Masvidal fight on UFC 300. I want to see good quality fights. I don't want people to reminisce about the past on UFC 300. I just want to see good fights. And I think this is a good option for both guys, honestly. Like, go get paid. Get outside the UFC umbrella. Put this fight together, and then other fighters will come. We've seen this before with boxing where, again, you have, MMA fighters, boxing, and then other fighters, take advantage of this and get on the card. I think this is awesome. I'll watch this fight. I'm intrigued by it. It's not the UFC, it's boxing, so it's something completely different. Well, not completely different, but, obviously going to be more intriguing doing a boxing match than having to worry about anything else. And obviously Masvidal winning the first fight against Nate Diaz in their BMF fight way back in what was the number here? New York. It was the card that Trump was at. I was at that card. UFC 244, Masvidal Diaz. So obviously Masvidal getting the win via a doctor stoppage. But I mean, even that doctor stoppage didn't happen. Masvidal was going to win that fight. He was dominating in the striking. We'll see if Diaz has anything left, so to speak, as far as winning this rematch. Of course, Diaz is coming off his loss to Jake Paul in his boxing fight. Losing back in August. So looking to get his first win in the boxing ring, at least recently. I think that was only Diaz's ever boxing fight as well. So yeah, I'm a fan of this. I think this is great. And like I said, the fighters are going to get paid well. They're not under the UFC restraints, so they can negotiate and figure out what works best. And I think this is a fight that will do quite well because, people are interested to see it in boxing. I think this will do better than if this was an MMA fight, to be honest, because it's boxing. There's going to be no ground game. It's going to be a fun, exciting matchup. And, we'll see how the rest of the card looks. He says March in Las Vegas, obviously UFC 300 in April. So the UFC typically used to do a big pay-per-view in March. That's not happening now with UFC 300 happening in April. So don't need to worry about it conflicting with the UFC. Again, the UFC giving the green light there to Masvidal, and we'll see what happens. Masvidal, lost 4 straight fights in the UFC, all to contenders. So, I think Masvidal's still got a bit left here. Quick tail of the tape. Masvidal, 39 years old, 5'11" with a 74-inch reach. Nate Diaz, 38 years old, 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. So Diaz a little bit taller, a little bit more of a reach here, and like a year younger, not even. So and Diaz, like I said, had the fight with Jake Paul, and then prior to that had the fight with Tony Ferguson in 2022. So we'll see how far Nate Diaz can go with his boxing stuff. Again, happy to see these guys get paid. I'm sure that they're going to get paid quite well, and we'll see sort of where they can go from here, because there's a lot of fun options. Plus, who's to say these guys don't do bare knuckle or, other things? I mean, there's a lot of fighters out there, you got Mike Perry, Eddie Alvarez. This could be a fight here, and then it could lead to other things as well. So I'm totally in favor of, seeing a fight like this, a fight put together like this, and think it's going to be interesting. I'm just curious to see how the rest of the card's going to look. Obviously, you got Diaz and Masvidal most likely headlining this card. Will we see a Jeremy Stevens come in, or Jose Aldo, or some of the other MMA fighters do boxing fights on this card? We've seen that in the past. Who's putting this together? What promotion is going to be backing this? Obviously Diaz is Real Fight will be involved in this, but how are they splitting the money? How's all this going? I'm really intrigued by all this, honestly. This is the first time that we've seen, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong here in the comments, but this is the first time I've seen 2 former UFC fighters box each other in this sort of fashion. I know we had Aldo and Stevens, but nothing to this magnitude in terms of 2 pretty popular names here going toe to toe. So really curious to see how this all unfolds. I'm sure we'll get more notice on this. And like I said, Happy Punch, I know they're sort of they're a boxing outlet, I guess. They do a bit of combat sports in general. Yeah, New Generation Combat Sports. Wow, they have 125,000 followers. I know they do more the influence stuff, but the fact that Ariel sort of put his stamp of approval on this, he would be in the know. So it looks like this is going to happen. And I'll say it once and I'll say it again. I'm just so happy this fight's not on UFC 300 because I don't want to see that for UFC 300. I don't want the UFC to rely on old stars to build up a card. I know they typically do cater to the casual fans, but I just want to see good quality fights on UFC 300. I don't want to see these types of fights, especially because like Diaz and Masvidal, if they came back to the UFC, what are they going to do? They're not going to go on any sort of run. They're not contenders. And also, you're not having them, like, I think if they were to come back, you get them to fight other guys and build them up, but neither of them should have to do that. And I don't think it makes sense to do that at all. So that's kind of where I stand on the Masvidal and Diaz fight. Happy to see this in boxing. And I kind of had a feeling this is where they were both going to go. I know I did that video on Masvidal and how I didn't want to see him at UFC 300, but I didn't realistically think that was going to happen. I was just sort of throwing it out there like, hey, UFC, don't get any ideas here. Because I know, again, the UFC scrambling to get things together for UFC 300. I know that's in April, but they're kind of running out of options right now. We'll see what they end up doing, but got to give credit to the UFC for stepping up to the plate, letting Masvidal box and take this fight. And I think it would have been a bad look if they didn't let him take this opportunity, right? Because like, what are you doing with Masvidal? Like, he's going to go box. It's not like Masvidal is going into another MMA promotion and they're like a rival to the UFC. I think the fact that it's boxing really doesn't have much to do with the UFC. So totally fine with that. And we'll see what Diaz can do here. It'll be interesting. He looked all right against Jake Paul, but, against a guy like Masvidal who's coming from the same area in MMA and, again, a bit of revenge there from that UFC 244 fight. I'm curious to see what happens. And I don't think we'll see a doctor stoppage this time, or maybe we will, but I think this could be a lot different, and we'll see who the better boxer is. Just pure boxing, right? So it's going to be very intriguing in terms of how the matchup's going to go down. And I guess the thing we're kind of waiting on now is like it seems like it's going to happen in Vegas. What date? And how's the rest of the card going? And like I said, we've had a lot of MMA guys go into boxing recently. Like I mentioned, Stevens and Aldo. You've also got guys like Anthony Pretty Boy Taylor has been doing some boxing now, former Bellator fighter. You have a few of these guys that could possibly step in there that are free agents. And I think they should add more MMA fighters to this card because a lot of the fans that are going to watch this are MMA fans. They're not necessarily going to be boxing fans. Bring those guys over, get them paid as well, and let's have some fun. And I think this is more of the norm, right? We're coming off a week as well where we just saw Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou get a fight booked. Like, seems like there's a lot of possibilities for fighters taking boxing fights. And at the end of the day, these guys are going to get paid more. And I'm totally cool with that. Like, I think a guy like Masvidal has put a lot of time and hours into his MMA career, and same thing with Diaz. To see them get paid even more, I think is fantastic. So to me, it's a win-win for everyone. And I think I want to see more of this. I want to see more of this type of stuff as opposed to guys coming back to MMA and trying to do something. I like the fact that they're trying something different. And it's just more intriguing, right? Like, I wouldn't have as much of an intrigue if this was just a regular MMA fight. The fact that it's just boxing, I think is more interesting because boxing is different than MMA, right? In terms of, the punching and everything, like it's just a lot different than what we're expecting with an MMA fight. So I'm totally down with that. And I will absolutely watch that fight. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you like this fact that it's a boxing fight? Who else do you think will be added to the card? What weight are they going to do this at? That's something I didn't even talk about. I mean, I'm guessing I think they'll maybe do like 185, then no one cuts weight. I don't know. We'll see what happens there. And then, what do you think is going to happen with UFC 300? I mean, again, I didn't realistically think that either of these names were going to be on there, but those are two names that are obviously off that card. So what are they going to do for UFC 300? We're going to be keeping an eye on that. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram @LynchOnSports. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.